Hey everyone! Today, I'm sharing a story from the summer of 2016 that still feels incredibly surreal and unsettling. I'd just married my longtime girlfriend. We'd been together for 12 years, and since we both loved the mountains, we'd camped and snowboarded there countless times. We decided a 20-day stay at a mountainside campground across the country would be the perfect honeymoon. Of course, our dogs came too. They love the outdoors as much as we do. After a 2-day road trip, we arrived, quickly set up our camper, and settled in. The place was beautiful. A couple of days in, we'd already met some fellow campers. We're experienced, so novices often ask us for help or supplies, and we're usually happy to lend a hand. It was day 4 or 5 when she first appeared, and I call her she because we never learned her name. We were sitting under a large pine tree at our site, drinking beers and playing cards, when she was suddenly just there. "Can I pet your dog?" she asked. Even our dogs were startled, barking wildly as they hadn't seen her approach. Given their reaction, I politely said no. Then she just stood there at the edge of our site, silent, not staring, not really doing anything. I asked if she needed anything. "No," she replied. After a few awkward minutes, she walked off. I work with people with brain injuries, so I've seen unusual social behaviors. I wasn't ready to label her creepy just yet, but she had my attention. I watched her walk to a campsite across the path and a few sites down. A small tent was already there, but she pulled an even smaller single-person tent from her backpack and began setting it up. We'd seen 2 young girls set up the other tent the day before. Those girls weren't around that day, and we didn't see them return that night. The next morning, I headed to the camp showers. Walking past her site, I saw her sitting in her little tent, door open, reading. I paid no mind. On my way back, her tent was closed but jiggling. Then, just as I was approaching her site, she unzipped the tent. I immediately saw she was completely nude. She positioned herself at the entrance, did this over-the-top, full-body stretch, arms to the sky, chest pushed forward, like some bizarre mating ritual clearly meant for me to see. She even let out this exotic moan. It was blatant. I continued to my site and told my wife. We laughed it off and went on with our day hike plans to a waterfall. The trailhead was accessible from the campground, a couple of kilometers away. We walked there at a good pace and stopped for a few minutes to take photos of the mountains before heading into the thicker bush. After about 5 minutes, as my wife was taking pictures, she emerged from the trail leading from the campground. My first thought, okay, coincidence. She's camping here, it's a common trail. But then she saw me see her, stopped dead in her tracks, and just stood there with that same unsettling demeanor. That's when I first said to my wife, "I think we have a stalker." My wife looked, immediately creeped out too. We continued hiking, and she followed, maintaining a consistent distance. Our dogs were distracted, especially our youngest, who kept looking back at her. I got fed up and decided we'd stop for water, let her pass. But when we stopped, she stopped too, just stood there. The "oh shit" factor jumped to a 9. We were genuinely concerned now. My wife and I agreed to cut the hike short, take a quicker loop back to camp. We jogged around bends when she was out of sight to create distance. We didn't see her again until later that night. That evening, my wife went for a shower. When she returned, she told me our stalker was in the bathrooms too, with 2 other girls, seemingly getting ready to go clubbing in the nearby ski town. These were the same 2 girls whose campsite she had partially occupied. My wife quickly realized the 2 girls and she's weren't really friends. The 2 girls were close, with plans, and our stalker was trying to tag along. The girls kept telling her they were meeting at a specific restaurant. It was 10:30 p.m. We knew that restaurant closed at 10 p.m. They were lying. The stalker kept asking, "Are you sure this place?" But they convinced her. She left to get ready, and the two friends stayed behind, finishing their makeup. My wife then heard them mocking and making fun of the stalker. My wife, who has no patience for bullying, creepy stalker or not, confronted them. Putting the cattiness aside, the girls explained the stalker had pitched her tent on their site uninvited while they were away. They'd returned to find her just living there. They were upset and trying to make her uncomfortable enough to leave, but she wouldn't budge. My wife asked why they didn't report her to the park warden. They said they were leaving the next day and didn't want a big fuss. Whatever happened with their fake dinner plans, we don't know. Around 3 a.m., a blood-curdling scream right outside our camper jolted us awake. My wife was trembling, dogs barking. I was startled but curious. I peeled back the window cover maybe 3 or 4 inches and saw her, standing motionless on the path. She seemed to make direct eye contact with me. My heart pounded. After what felt like an eternity, she calmly turned and walked to her tent. I made sure our trailer was locked. An hour and a stiff whiskey later, we managed to get back to sleep. The next day, Friday, our friends arrived from a nearby city for the weekend. They hadn't been at our site for 15 minutes, still setting up their tent when she appeared again, seemingly from nowhere. This time, she was in our site. I hadn't yet told our friends about her, so they were initially friendlier than I was. She asked again if she could pet my dog, who was barking intensely at her. I said something like, "She isn't being friendly, so I'd prefer you didn't." She didn't pet the dog, but just stood there, staring at me as if contemplating my dismemberment. Then she noticed our friend's tent brand, commented it was the same model as hers, just larger. My buddy, sensing the vibe and my discomfort, just gave a curt, "Oh yeah, cool." Then she grabbed his tent pegs and hammer, saying she'd help because she had experience. He declined and asked for his tools back. Cue a psychopath stare down, now with her holding a hammer. The "oh shit" factor spiked. She then dropped everything and ran off. I explained the past few days to our friends, and they agreed we needed to watch her. By now, the 2 girls whose site she'd hijacked were gone. It was Friday night. We'd been drinking all day, feeling pretty good. Around 11 p.m., she'd walked over to our site again. "Hey," she said, "you guys seem to have a lot of extra room with the tent and the camper. Do you think I could stay with you guys tonight? We could have a lot of fun in there together." My buddy, emboldened by day beers, replied, "Did you just propose a gang bang to us?" I was just sitting there, whiskey in hand, taking it all in. She hadn't really looked at me. Then she smiled, turned her head, looked directly at me and said, "I like your friend." Then she turned and walked away into the darkness towards the forest. What? The actual fuck? We were all terrified she'd return. I decided then, if we saw her again in a creepy way, I was calling the park warden. This was getting out of hand. Later, as the night wound down, we all walked to the bathrooms. On our way, my wife grabbed my hoodie. "Babe, look." Our stalker's campsite was completely destroyed. Stuff everywhere, garbage, clothing, food. I wondered if it was a bear, but no, we would have heard that. Then I noticed her tent was gone. She was gone, leaving a total mess. As luck would have it, Park Patrol was doing fire rounds and were at the trashed site when we returned. We told them about the girl, her erratic behavior, and our suspicion she was squatting. We didn't see her again for the rest of our trip until our last full day. There's a great little lookout near our site with amazing views of the river and valley, perfect for watching the sunset. It was a lovely final evening for our otherwise beautiful honeymoon. Just when we thought we were done with her, she emerged again, seemingly from nowhere. We were on the bolted-down chairs at the viewpoint, taking pictures. As my wife looked through her camera, she spotted the woman in the distance, standing in the woods down the mountainside towards the valley, watching us. As her final act, she walked up the mountainside and sat right beside us on a boulder next to the chairs, said nothing, just sat there. My wife brilliantly asked me to take one last picture of the scenery, giving me a little wink. I got her idea immediately and positioned myself so she would be in the photo. My wife wanted her picture in case anything else happened before we left. We took our final views and headed to camp. We didn't see or hear from her again. Reflecting on it, we agreed she obviously had some serious mental health issues and zero social skills. We did see her try to befriend those two girls who treated her terribly. That said, her actions, the stalking, the midnight scream, running into the woods at night, were way beyond socially awkward. They were terrifying. There were moments I genuinely feared she might become violent. Here's what happened when I was 13. My parents sent me to an all-girls fitness camp, though, let's be real, it was basically a fat camp. The goal was to help me become the best version of myself, but in practice it was pretty rough. The food was terrible, the counselors were awful, and we had to do exercise all day long. The camp was set on a college campus, and we stayed in dorm-style rooms, 2 girls per room. I was actually hopeful about the summer because my roommate seemed really cool. Let's call her Mary. We had a lot in common, similar interests and style, and we instantly clicked. We stayed up late talking about escaping the camp, complaining about how we had to give up our cell phones, although secretly I managed to sneak mine in. We vented about our families and how much we hated being there. Honestly, I was surprised Mary was at the camp at all since she seemed pretty fit, and her parents signed her up for the entire summer, while mine only sent me for 2 weeks. Just 2 days in, a girl I had become friends with pulled me aside and warned me about Mary. She said Mary had a lot of problems and had been sleeping alone in a single room for a while because no one else wanted to room with her. At first, I shrugged it off as rumors and girls being mean. That same day at lunch, Mary suddenly seemed mad at me and I couldn't figure out why. When I got the chance, I asked her what was wrong. She went off on me about how everyone was mean to her and asked if I was going to leave her too. She explained that one girl she used to room with had switched rooms because she wanted to be friends with some popular girl, and Mary claimed that girl had made up lies to fit in. Foolishly, I believed Mary. We kept hanging out, but looking back now, I realized she was isolating me from everyone else. Towards the end of my first week, the camp took us on a long hike to a local pool. It was a big deal because it was scorching hot, and swimming was only allowed once a week. Mary and I were really excited. When we arrived, we claimed some chairs and left our stuff there. Since Mary had been at camp for months, she didn't have to take the mandatory swim test, but I did. I passed easily thanks to my swim team experience. Once I jumped into the pool and started floating around, I heard Mary calling me to the deep end. I swam over, curious about what she wanted to show me. Suddenly, she grabbed my neck and shoved me underwater. I'm a strong swimmer and can hold my breath for a long time, but I panicked. I opened my mouth to scream, but somehow I managed to kick her off and swim away. I pulled myself out of the pool, gasping for air. When I looked back, Mary was just staring at me, not moving. I grabbed my things and ran straight to the bathroom, calling my mom in tears. She didn't believe me at first, which hurt a lot. I stayed in that bathroom until it was time to return to camp and didn't leave the counselor's side during the walk back. When we got back, one of the camp leaders pulled me aside and demanded my cell phone. I denied having one and asked why they thought I did. They told me my parents had called about an assault, saying I had called them. I explained I borrowed a phone from a woman at the pool, and they accepted that, for now. They said I'd be moved to a new room the next day, but that I still had to spend one last night with Mary. I begged them to let me sleep on the floor of another girl's room, but they called me melodramatic and refused. As soon as I was alone, I ran back to the bathroom and called my mom again. That's when I learned the full truth about Mary. I wasn't her second roommate, or even third or fourth. I was the sixth girl to be placed with her. 3 of her previous roommates had left camp early, and 2 had switched rooms as soon as they could. All 5 girls had accused Mary of violence, but the camp did nothing. They said she was just a troubled girl who wanted friends, or, as they told my parents, she has had some issues in the past. That night was the worst. I couldn't sleep, and neither did Mary. She just sat in bed staring at me the whole time. I was terrified. I kept my phone clutched in my hand with 911 dialed, ready to call if she tried anything. When the sun finally came up, I nearly cried with relief. The next day, I was moved to a different room, in another building. Somehow, I managed to break my foot in the process, so my parents drove up to get me and take me home, with a cast to mark my time there. Even now, years later, what Mary did still affects me. I've had trouble living with roommates and making friends ever since. So, Mary, wherever you are, let's just never cross paths again. I live in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, up here in northeast Georgia. It's a really beautiful place, hundreds of miles of national forest, some amazing state parks, and tons of great camping spots. But it's also a pretty poor area. A lot of the locals don't have much. It's mostly Walmart, fast food joints, and a few grocery stores that offer jobs. Aside from a handful of doctors, lawyers, and some Georgia Power employees, there isn't much work around here. If it wasn't for my freelance technical writing, which lets me work online, I'd probably have to move somewhere else. Staying here too long without something else going for you can really hold you back. To the east of town, there's a huge national forest with lots of camping spots and trails that don't see a lot of foot traffic. I love hiking there with my dog, but it can be a little unnerving sometimes. The trailheads are about a 10-mile drive from town, and there's no cell phone service or houses anywhere nearby. Over the years, people have broken into cars parked at some trailheads, so the gravel parking lots often have shattered glass scattered around. You'll also spot some pretty rough folks hanging around the trailheads or driving down the Forest Service roads. These roads are really rough, and you'll see beat-up cars, like those $500 clunkers, ripping down them, which are really meant for 4x4s. Some of the people you see driving look like they came straight out of a Breaking Bad episode. Despite all that, it's still a great place to camp. You just have to be cautious. A few years ago, 2 friends and I decided to go play paintball in the national forest. Probably not exactly legal, I know, but we figured we'd turn it into a camping trip so we could play the next morning too. After a day of shooting paintballs at each other without much incident, we drove a couple of miles to one of the more popular camping spots. Unfortunately, a church group or something had taken up all the spots there. That was the only camping area we really knew, and it was getting late. So, we decided to keep driving and find another spot. We drove further and further into the woods for about an hour. By this time, it was starting to get dark, and we were getting a bit worried. All of us had GPS on our phones, but none of us had any cell service. Eventually, we turned down an unfamiliar, rough road. It looked like the Forest Service had tried to block it off with a mound of dirt, probably using a backhoe. There was a broken metal barrier nearby in the woods, but the dirt mound was worn down enough that it looked like some 4x4s had gone over it. Our truck, a Ford F-150 with good clearance, was up for the challenge, so we carefully drove over the mound and onto an old gravel road that was pretty clear. After driving a few miles, we found an opening by a small creek. There were blue tarps hanging over a plywood table nailed to a tree, which seemed kind of strange. But since it was already pretty dark, we didn't want to keep driving around all night looking for a spot. We left the truck lights running and started setting up our tent. While setting up, I noticed a lot of trash scattered in the woods around the site. I saw a green bottle on the ground and picked it up. It was a bottle of home and garden insecticide. At the time, I was tired and just figured someone had dumped their garbage out here. We all thought it was weird, but nobody really questioned it. It's strange to think someone would dump garbage more than an hour away from the nearest home. We set up camp, cracked open some beers, and made chili from scratch. It was probably around 11 p.m. at that point. While we were eating, we noticed a faint glow coming from the other side of a nearby hill. At first, we thought it was just moonlight filtering through the trees, but the angles didn't quite make sense. It wasn't a bright light and it wasn't moving. It looked more like the kind of glow you'd see from a distant city, but we couldn't see the actual source of the light. There were no other roads nearby, so we figured it wasn't other campers. The hill was about a quarter of a mile away, so Jacob and I decided to check it out. Isaac, our other friend, stayed back to make popcorn over the fire. As we walked toward the light, things got even weirder. All the trees in the area had their bark stripped off in a perfect circle around their trunks. We thought maybe it was a beaver from the creek, but it seemed odd that a beaver would go all around stripping bark like that. Jacob and I joked loudly about a ghost beaver, probably because we'd had a few rum and cokes. As we neared the top of the hill, Jacob tripped and yelled, "Oh shit!" Right after that, the light went out. We looked at each other and decided maybe we didn't need to find out what the light really was. We quietly headed back to camp, turning off our flashlights to rely on the moonlight. When we got within a couple hundred feet of camp, I saw Isaac wandering around. He was wearing a hooded coat that I hadn't seen him wear before, and he was carrying his paintball gun. That seemed strange. The fire had died down, so the campsite was dim, but Isaac kept walking around and peering into the tent like he was searching for something. We guessed he might have gotten up to use the bathroom and didn't want to walk through the woods like we did. When we got back, we sat by the fire and waited for Isaac to return. Suddenly, he stumbled out of the tent, looked sick, and vomited. Later, after a few more rum and cokes, he was mumbling. We asked him why he was wandering around with the paintball gun. He looked confused and said, "They're locked up in the cab of the truck. Did you unlock it?" We checked the truck. The paintball gear was exactly where we left it. The keys were still hidden under the truck in a magnetic fob. I felt a sinking feeling. I asked Isaac what he had been doing while we were gone. He said he was watching a movie on his phone and then fell asleep. We asked again, had he changed jackets or gone anywhere else? He insisted he had been in the tent the whole time, wearing the same fleece without a hood. Someone had been wandering around our campsite. It wasn't Isaac. At this point, we were all too drunk to drive, but we decided to pack up and head back to my house. We didn't even bother packing up the tent, just folded it down with everything inside. We jumped in the truck and started driving out. When we reached the dirt mound blocking the road, something gray was standing in the way. The metal barrier we'd seen earlier was now back in place. We didn't want to get out and move it. I slowly drove forward, tapping the barrier with the front of the truck. It fell off like it had just been balanced there. We drove over it carefully, worried it might pop a tire, but luckily it didn't. As we drove down the road, we noticed a vehicle following us with its lights off, about 1,000 feet behind. It stayed a couple of turns behind us and kept catching glimpses of our truck in the moonlight. I drove as fast as I could on the gravel roads, but the other vehicle kept pace. It never got closer, but it was definitely following. After about 45 minutes, we finally hit the paved road. I decided to take a different route home to be safe. Luckily, I didn't get pulled over for DUI. Camping out here can be fun, but deep in the woods it can also be dangerous. I've driven past that metal barrier a few times since then. It's always back in place. And I know I'll never go down that road again. A few years ago, on October 10th, my girlfriend and I decided to hike the southern portion of Virginia's Appalachian Trail. We'd already done several parts of the trail before, but this 166-mile stretch through the George Washington and Jefferson National Forests, from Roanoke County to Pearisburg in Giles County, was one of the most remote and least traveled sections. Exactly what we were looking for. We started early on the morning of October 11th at the Virginia Creeper Trail trailhead. Our plan was to hike all the way to Damascus and then head home to our own beds, exhausted but happy. The air was crisp, the leaves were bursting with fall colors, and the weather was perfect for hiking. For the most part, the hike was peaceful and uneventful. We camped where the trail allowed, mostly designated shelters or spots right on the trail. But the last couple of nights are what really stick with me. On October the 15th, after a long day of hiking, we decided to camp off the trail. We wanted privacy and didn't want anyone surprising us in the middle of the night. After searching for a bit, we found a small clearing a short distance from the path. It felt perfect. We set up camp, cooked dinner, and settled down to sleep. Around 2 a.m., I was suddenly shaken awake by my girlfriend. She whispered urgently, "Get your gun." Someone's outside walking around our tent. She had woken up hearing what sounded like someone running a knife or sharp object along the tent's fabric, circling us. I carry a 1911 pistol and a Judge revolver when hiking, just in case. I grabbed the Judge from my pack and we sat silently, listening. Minutes passed with only the breeze rustling through the trees. Then I heard it. Snap. Crunch. Snap. Someone or something was moving in the woods behind our tent. I grabbed my flashlight and slowly exited the tent. Our fire had burned out, so it was pitch black except for the faint glow of the October moon. I told my girlfriend to stay put and carefully scanned the area. I didn't turn on the flashlight right away. I didn't want to reveal my position and become a target. After waiting, the noises came again. Snap, crunch, crack. The steps sounded bipedal, like a person walking. I finally turned on the light and shone it toward a tree where I thought I saw movement. I shouted, warning whoever was there that I was armed and to leave. The figure darted away to my right, crashing through the underbrush. I swung the light to the original spot and then heard more footsteps fleeing into the woods. I wasn't about to chase anyone in the dark, so I went back to camp and kept watch outside our tent until dawn. The next morning, October 16th, around 8 a.m., I searched the area near our tent. Not far away, I found a boot print in moist dirt that wasn't ours. That meant someone had definitely been there, close enough to circle us during the night. I kept this to myself to avoid worrying my girlfriend more. We still had 2 days left of hiking. We picked up the pace and covered as much ground as possible that day. Later, on October 16th evening, I found a new campsite near a cliff. We positioned our tent under a small overhang so no one could sneak up behind us. The whole day, I had this gut feeling we were being followed, even though I didn't see or hear anyone. That night, I gave my girlfriend the 1911 and kept the Judge close. I promised her I would stay alert even if I fell asleep. Hours passed in silence until I was suddenly awakened by the sound of someone rifling through our gear outside. I quietly grabbed my gun and woke my girlfriend, telling her to stay silent. By the faint firelight, I saw a shadowy silhouette right outside the tent. Someone was there. I yelled at them to get out. "We are armed. Get the fuck out of here." They immediately dropped what they were doing and ran. I grabbed my gun and stepped out, ready to confront whoever it was. Our stuff was scattered everywhere. I followed footprints to the edge of the woods near a creek. Downstream, I saw a flickering lantern light, and then 3 more figures appeared on the other side of the trees. Without hesitation, I told my girlfriend to pack what she could, and we left everything else behind. We hurried back to the trail, moving through the dark forest. I kept checking over my shoulder as we heard voices and snapping branches behind us. The whole time, I was terrified. We'd been walking for a while when, just before sunrise on October 17th around 6 a.m., someone stepped onto the trail ahead and silently watched us. I couldn't make out their face, just a shadowy figure standing still. I asked who they were and what they wanted. They didn't respond, just turned and disappeared back into the woods. We didn't stop until we reached my girlfriend's car. We were exhausted, shaken, but safe. Looking back, I still have no idea who those people were or what they wanted. Maybe they were just messing with us, or maybe it really was some kind of dangerous group lurking deep in the woods. Either way, I won't be going back to find out.